Is it a coincidence that all medications look like childhood candies? The two that sat in Jim's palm looked like dots, the kind you'd get on long, thin sheets of paper. They did taste a bit like the paper that would always inevitably stick to the back when you pulled them off, but nothing whatsoever like the candy. They're for his anxiety, though ironically one of the biggest anxieties he has is taking pills. Any pills. More recently, on anecdotal evidence, Jim had convinced himself that he was an anaphylactic, whose throat would close up at the sign of anything. This fear usually centered around common things people were allergic to, and things he found on WebMD to self-diagnose. But to this day, he had never actually had an anaphylactic attack. Many panic attacks, but never anaphylaxis. He put them in his mouth, letting them sit on his tongue while staring at himself in the mirror. A rotund 15-year-old face with mousy brown hair and stark green eyes stared him back, hoping for change. One of the common side effects is weight loss, he reminded himself, with a slight bit of joy that went away after downing the glass and letting them swirl around in his mouth. The pills danced there for a moment and were forced down. If they don't touch the sides of my throat on the way down, I'll be okay. That was not how it worked, but he could never suffer himself to learn too much about his supposed maladies. That would require work and effort that most 15-year-olds could not muster to clean their rooms. "Ma?" he called. From a nearby room, a lilting female voice called back. "Yes?" with a slight annoyance in the voice that Jim ignored. "I'm okay." "Good. May I please use the bathroom now? I have to get ready for work." "Yes, sorry, wait a sec." He heard a sigh from the other room. Stepping to the toilet, he dropped his pants and sat down. There he saw one of his most hated daily sights. His thighs butted together, making him unable to look down into the toilet between his legs. "I will not be thin or happy until I can see water down there." It was a goal he could only envision vaguely, as if other boys sat down in the toilet overjoyed to see their dick and balls hanging down there above the water, rather than just trying to take a shit. He relieved himself, and after pulling up his pants, he called again, "Now I'm done." On exiting the bathroom, his mother stood there, head cocked to one side, with a questioning look on her face. The look said, "Are you sure you're okay?" Looking at her pursed lips and earnest face, he knew what she wanted. Reassurance. Reassurance that what happened the week before would not happen again. "I'm fine," he said. Something in her face said that she didn't believe him. He said again, stressing, "I am fine." She rolled her eyes at him and entered the bathroom. Was that a tickle in my throat? No, I will not let this happen. He told himself, then breathed deeply and let it out slowly, just like the internet had taught him. Of course, he was still going to Google the other side effects of his medication while at school. It would do nothing whatsoever to alleviate his anxiety. In fact, it would again bolster his fears. Doctors were not trustworthy. Nurses were not trustworthy. At least until they told you what you wanted to hear. With all their fancy degrees and residency, or whatever. He knew better. Presently, he's rooting through the cabinets to make himself a fearless lunch. He shoved aside a jar of peanut butter. God, I love peanut butter. He came upon some tuna. I love tuna too. But they were things people could be allergic to, and he had to avoid them. What could he eat that wouldn't send him into the throes of panic, that wouldn't send him into the hospital again? Chips were in the next cabinet over. Those are fine. Sitting between the microwave and next to the spindle of ladles and large knives were several cans of Diet Cola. That's fine too. But it wasn't enough. He knew that his mother would check his lunch bag to make sure he even brought food. There had been a period of time where he hadn't brought anything for days in the hopes that skipping lunch would help him lose weight. It had no result other than a scolding from his mother and her constant checking to see if he was eating properly. Opening the fridge, he found some thin sliced ham and mustard and made himself a sandwich that he would probably throw away once he had gotten to school. With his bag packed and his heart thumping, "That's one of the side effects. Just ignore it." He stepped outside, yelling, "Goodbye, Ma!" She did not respond, even as he slammed the door behind him. He walked to school very deliberately, getting in some morning exercise even though he could have ridden the bus. It was, after all, only 2 miles and it was good exercise. That's what Dr. What's-His-Name had said. This advice he would take. It meant reaching his goal of seeing the water in the toilet between his thighs, of wearing the clothes he had worn just a year earlier. There was, of course, no chance of wearing those clothes again, as he had sprung up in height about 3 inches and would continue to grow until he reached his final height of 6'1". He became short of breath. He was accustomed to this, being as large as he was, but instead attributed it to the medication and the general maladies that plagued him or didn't plague him, depending on how you wanted to look at it. "I'm okay." He kept walking, but a stitch began to form in his side and he stopped. "I'm early anyways." Sitting on the sidewalk in the oppressive heat, was it hot? It dawned on him that it was practice day again. It won't be like last week, he promised himself. There, the memory of it swam to the forefront of his mind. He was told hike. Then as the snap released from his hand, an idle insect pierced his forearm with its stinger. The momentary sharp pain brought about a host of thoughts and memories that had been hidden away. A man stepping through a downed log in the forest, then a cloud enshrouding him. He awoke from the momentary lapse in time, gasping for air and pounding the ground as if to draw it up from the grass. A circle of boys, helmets idly at their sides, stared in wonderment, a few of them asking if he was okay. The event had brought a host of fluctuations under his skin, as if it were being flayed from his body. He wondered, is this how I'm going to die? I haven't even had a girlfriend yet. Then, give him some air. From his vantage point, the circle framing the overcast sky began to part at that command. Neither the movement of the boys nor his own incessant pounding of the ground gave him the air he so desperately wanted. He could feel his pulse in his face, raging, coursing. He could feel the blood behind his eyes. Over his ringing ears, he heard someone yell, "Call an ambulance!" It was only when he was in the back of the transport, strapped to a gurney with a nasal cannula beneath his nose, that he did eventually calm down. Thereafter, a host of questions from doctors and nurses assailed him to get to the bottom of this. The IV idly dripped saline into his arm. He could breathe again, but the world was still so bright, yet distant. Like every person that came to talk to him were a strange puppet on strings murmuring medical talk and explaining how he felt and what was going on with him. They are wrong. I am an anaphylactic. Where did you hear that word, Jim? Then the even deeper memory came to mind that he pushed away. A bloated body with pockmarks all over him lay in the leaf-strewn floor of a forest, gasping for air, clutching its throat for one last moment of life. The scratch marks there will forever be frozen in time as the last instant of his. He stood up from the curb and pressed on to his school. Fuck that shit. And hoped that the better outcome of his walking would be to get his mind off everything. However, his anxiety had already peaked, waiting for an idle moment so it could take over. His avoidance of thoughts that caused him anxiety were beginning to have their effect as well. The more he thought about not thinking a thing, the more it came to mind. You know what they say about purple elephants. He reached the school with only slight tremors and low-grade apprehension, hoping beyond hope that he wouldn't die in some frightful fashion. First period was study hall, and instead of using his time to study the use of Avogadro's number, he surfed the internet. He cracked his soda, slightly anticipating a nosy teacher might come around to yell at him for having drinks in the computer area. Also, they might see that he was not studying, but scanning forums about anxiety and phobias. None had come. He read in several posts that anxiety had roots in our need to control our surroundings from things that could hurt us, and sometimes from things that could not hurt us. That in order to alleviate such anxiety, people will develop strange rituals that they believe will ward off any offending attack. That in others, people will manage it with medication. That the overreaching theme of anxiety was that it really was all in your head. But he didn't want to read all that. That's not possible. I can't come too close to the answer. Jim had a sudden nausea, a feeling like he was about to vomit. He choked it back and checked his pulse, breathing deeply and quickly, hoping to quell it. His quick breaths did not have the effect he wanted. They raised his heart rate. That feeling of unreality came over him again. He scanned the room. Distant dancing puppets took books off shelves and texted while they thought no one was looking. His thought began to race. What if someone sees me? There is nowhere to hide from this. I'm being watched. I don't want to go to the hospital again. I should have an EpiPen like... Dad? Yeah, his father asked vaguely. What's the meaning of life? They trudged forward through the woods looking for interesting birds. Jim got to hold the binoculars. It was his special purpose to keep them safe and unbroken. "Jim, you can't possibly be asking me a question like that," his father replied with a slight chuckle, then looked down at Jim to see his petulant face. The face meant it. "Holy shit, really?" Still, that face waited for an answer. He took a deep breath. "I don't know how to answer that, buddy." "Couldn't you just make something up?" Jim asked. "No, I'd be lying to you. I don't know the meaning of life. Just that we're here and we do stuff." "But how can you even know that?" Jim asked in that way that all children do, knowing full well that they're being annoying but continuing anyways because they know that the person they're annoying won't show it. "I can't," he said, shrugging. "I can't really know anything. It's just best to ignore that and move on." They continued to walk, Jim's wheels turning. Suddenly he said, "Wait, if you can't know anything, then you can't know for a fact that you can't know anything. Otherwise it would be something that you knew for a certainty." His piping voice raised at the end. His father sighed. "That's true." He nodded then, "And it's not true, too." Then laughed, hoping his laughter would be infectious. His son was way too serious about everything. "That doesn't make any sense." He frowned and giggled, then gave his father a playful shove. "It's not funny." After regaining his balance, he said, "Yes, it is," he said in pretend stoicism. "No, it isn't." He shoved again, just a little harder this time. To regain his balance, Jim's father stepped sideways into a downed log. He pulled his foot out and realized in horror that he had stumbled into a bee's nest. Or was it yellow jackets? Jim couldn't remember. The swarm enshrouded his father, stinging him over and over again. He screamed in horror, running in circles around and around. Jim was frozen in place as his father's almost comical movements led him to begin rolling around on the ground as if he were on fire. "That's not what you're supposed to do," he thought, and it was the last thought he would have before his father died, an unbreathing, swollen mess with pockmarks all over his body. He had thrown his walking stick into the air, and it landed at Jim's feet. Jim stared for a long moment at the keyboard. Is there any way to move on? I will never know. He noticed with a slight joy that his panic was gone. Maybe he had faced some primal thing, and that was what had calmed him. It can't be that easy. Nothing is ever that easy. He was resigned that it was over, and that was all that mattered. Lazily, he let his eyes wander to his soda can. There it read, "Phenylaceutorix. Contains phenylalanine." What the fuck is that? He wondered, and began to Google again. Thank you for watching. Hey everyone, tell me about your phobias in the comments section. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Also, apparently you have to hit that teeny little bell that's next to the subscribe button to get notified whenever I upload a video.